I will show you that what makes these four nations distinct, USA, Israel, Iran, and Russia, what makes them distinct is that they have a grand strategy that allows them to mobilize their population for total war. And that's what makes them distinct, okay? And I'll show you this later on, all right? All right, so let me explain to you how this dynamic will play out. Okay, so you have US, Russia, Iran, Israel. Okay? So the major players that will determine how these four play the games are, of course, Europe, China, Japan, India. Okay. All right. So I understand that a lot of people believe that China and the United States are in competition with each other. That is not true. And the reason why is that China does not have what we call a grand strategy. A grand strategy is just how you perceive geopolitics and how you want to dominate geopolitics. China does not do grand strategy. China is called 中国. Okay? 中国 means the middle kingdom. The idea of the middle kingdom is that we are a universe unto ourselves. We don't care what happens outside of this universe. We would like others to pay tribute to our cultural superiority, and we could help develop your other civilizations, but honestly, we don't care. Okay? So China has always been an isolationist society for most of its history. Today, yes, I understand for these past few decades, China has become much more globalized, has become much more international, much more cosmopolitan, but this is not part of the Chinese tradition. So what's happening today, these past few decades, it is an aberration. It goes against cultural norms in China. But in the long term, China will return to its cultural norms and become much more isolationist. So China doesn't really matter in the great scheme of things, okay? The same is true for India as well. All right, so I know India and China have a lot of people, but historically, they have not really mattered in geopolitics. And that's to do with their cultural values and norms. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So, there are right now 3 major battlefields in the world. Okay? The first, obviously, is Ukraine, where NATO and Russia are fighting each other, okay? And this is a proxy war between the United States and Russia because the United States controls Europe and NATO. The second major battlefield, of course, is Iran, where right now the United States and Israel is attacking Iran and trying to force it into a surrender. Now, the last battlefield is actually in North America, Cuba. Okay, so this is not really discussed a lot. What's been happening is the United States has been embargoing Cuba, trying to blockade it, trying to cause society to collapse. And Russia has been trying to save Cuba, okay? So these are the 3 major battlefronts we're seeing right now. Obviously, what's going to happen is that more battlefronts will break out, okay? And what's going to happen is that as this conflict increases, the conflict between the United States and Russia will increase as well. So one major area of contention is the oceans. Okay? Why? Because the United States believes that it controls all trade access. Because the oceans represents trade access. And so what the United States has been doing is it has been seizing Russian shadow fleet tankers. And so what's going to happen is that the Russians will eventually decide to arm its ships, and this will create a war in the oceans, okay? So that's one trend that we will see happening. Another trend that we'll see happening is the rise of Germany and Japan, okay? Hey, why? Well, historically, the most powerful nation in Europe has been Germany. Historically, the most powerful nation in East Asia has been Japan. The United States defeated both in World War II. But now that the United States is at war with Russia, it needs proxies, it needs allies to counter both the threat of Russia as well as China. So it makes sense that what the United States is going to do is it's going to arm Israel to counter Iran, it's going to arm Germany to counter Russia, and it's going to arm Japan to counter China. Okay? And what's going to happen now is that you have in this conflict, you have other players emerge that will take advantage of these conflicts to amass more power for themselves. So think about North Korea in East Asia, okay? Because North Korea, it's a military society, and it can threaten South Korea, Japan, and China, okay? Then in Europe, you have Poland. In the Middle East, you have Turkey. Okay? So these nations are going to try to navigate all this chaos in order to amass more power for themselves. So in other words, what's going to happen is complete chaos in World War III. Okay? And it's something that we'll discuss more concretely for the rest of the semester. All right? So now what I'm going to do now is explain to you the grand strategy of the United States, Russia, Iran, and Israel. Because these are only the four major players for the first 5 years. Other players will come in later on, but for now, these are the four major players. Okay? And once you understand the grand strategy of these four countries, then it's going to be pretty easy for us to predict how they will behave as this war progresses. All right. Okay. So, for each country, I want you to imagine each country as a chess set, okay? So this is a chess set. And I want to show you how each player behaves using this chess set as a template, as a frame of reference, okay? So the king is the political system. All right? So the first idea to understand is that when you fight a war, you're not trying to defeat the other person's military. That doesn't really get you anywhere. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to put your opponent in check by attacking the political system. All right, and I'll show you how later on, okay? So the king is the political system. The queen is the grand strategy. The grand strategy is, again, how each player perceives geopolitics and how to best dominate geopolitics, okay? And then you have the bishop, the knight, and the rook. And these are the attack vectors. The attack vectors are your mechanisms, your tools for achieving your grand strategy, right? And now you have the pawn. And the pawn are just that. They are sacrificial tools that you can use in order to advance your grand strategy, okay? You just throw them away. You don't really care. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so now let's apply this system to the four nation states. United States, Russia, Iran, and Israel. All right, okay. So, the United States, the political system, of course, is a democracy. And this is both good and bad, okay? It's good in that it allows for innovation. It allows for debate and openness and creativity, okay? So that's what's good about democracy. What's bad about democracy is the idea of polarization. Okay, polarization. Okay, why? Because in a democracy, you have different political parties. And they can reach a point where they just refuse to work together. And all they care about is destroying each other, regardless of the consequences for the nation in geopolitics. And this is what's happened in the United States so far right now, where in America, Trump hates the Democrats much more than he hates the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians, okay? All right, so the way you put America into check is by enhancing the polarization and causing a civil war. Okay, does that make sense? You cannot defeat America militarily. It is impossible to do so. The only way to defeat America is if you force it into a civil war that distracts it from the world, okay? So that is the American political system. Then the grand strategy. The grand strategy is called Greater North America. And the idea of Greater North America is